The next way of thinking about the variability in data is going to be something called a deviation. And a deviation is something that can be found for every single value in your data set. And specifically, a deviation refers to how far a particular observation or value in your sample is from the mean of that sample. And I'll go to the document camera again after the slide and show you the formula for a deviation and give some examples. But what it boils down to again is how far a particular observation is from the mean of the sample. And so with that in mind, each observation has its own deviation. And as we'll see, a useful quality of the deviation is that the sum of your deviations always equals 0. So when you find the deviations for every value in your data set, if you add those deviations together, they should come up as 0. And I tell you this because this is a useful way to double check your work and to see if you have the right deviations. If you do, they're going to all sum to 0. If not, you might have some issue somewhere further upstream in your calculations. But as with anything where you can check your work by summing it, if you're rounding it all, it's possible that you'll end up with something that's a little higher than 0 or a little bit lower than 0. And a final note about deviations before I go talk about them with the example is that we've been talking about extreme values and statistics that are sensitive to extreme values, and deviations are also a way of thinking about extreme values. And specifically, an extreme value is any value that has a really high deviation. So if a particular value is very far from the mean, it would have a high deviation and we'd consider it an extreme value. And there are different ways of deciding exactly what constitutes an extreme value, but for now you can just think of it in terms of any observation that has a really high deviation. So any observation in your sample that's really far away from the mean or typical observation would be considered an extreme value. All right, so lots of talking about deviations. Now I'll go back over to the document camera and calculate deviations for our data and take a look at what they show us.